Hello, everyone. My name is Kimberly, pronouns she, her, hers, and this is my version of what dance movement therapy is. Well, there's a little bit of research in there. There's also my perspective because I thought that that would be a nice way to understand what dance movement therapy is about. You can also go through plenty of websites like the American Dance Therapy Association or any associations across the world that have a dance therapy association. But this is my perspective, and I hope it's a little bit enlightening for you about what dance therapy is and why it's a benefit and why it's a value. Let us get started. So, presentation outline, probably nothing new, but I do it with all my presentations because I think there's value in knowing where we are going. So we are going to start with the creative arts. What are the creative arts? Because that's what dance movement therapy falls under. Then we're going to look at dance movement therapy quickly from the literature, and then we're going to look at dance movement therapy from my perspective, and dance and culture in brief, because there's a vast amount I could say on that topic, but this is meant to be a short presentation. And then to dance is human, you'll see what that is. I think that's really sweet. It's a quote. And then references and contact information. Okay? So hopefully pretty straightforward. So what do we have here? Creative arts. What comes to mind when you think of creative arts? Generally, dance, music, movement, all those different things, art, right? Drama can technically be considered, writing poetry, creative writing, all these different things. So dance movement therapy falls under the creative arts therapies, as previously mentioned, because it involves dance, not always, but we're looking at dance as a creative art. So the best thing I can say to this is that the creative arts have long been used throughout history as healing, as creative, as expression, all these different things. And finally, research is starting to understand and standing into, oh yes, there's healing and there's value in the creative arts. All right, dance movement therapy from the literature. Quick. Dance movement therapy is grounded in the belief that bodily and psychological changes basically influence one another, right? So we think about the mind influencing the body influencing the mind, right? We all live in a body and believe that bodily movements can be shaped by our affective states or changes in movement patterns, possibly facilitating corresponding changes in psychological and social experiences. Just as an example, think about when you're sad. Your body mirrors when you're sad. Maybe there's tears, maybe your body hunches over, right? There's a bodily expression of it. Because of these beliefs, the core of DMT's work with clients is through actions, observations, and bodily sensations. So something I want you to notice. It doesn't say dance per se, right? Dance is movement. So that's what I want you to think about too. And I'm going to reiterate this point. Dance does not have to be these big, grandiose things, nor does it have to be a structured ballet, jazz type of thing, modern, right? It is movement. So I gesture a lot. That to me is movement. That is dance in and of itself. That's my form of personal expression. So what is dance movement therapy from my perspective? So I am a dance movement therapist, and I'm really proud to be able to say that because it is something special to be able to understand how to invite movement into psychology and why that's such a benefit for people. So dance movement therapy is the means of honoring the human experience of living in a body, right? I said this a few minutes ago, maybe at this point. We are human. We live in a body, right? All of us live in a body. So why would we want to exclude that when we're looking at our mental health? We want to invite that in because that's part of our experience, especially if you think about trauma. Sometimes trauma happens to the body. And if we're not paying attention to that, we're missing a key piece. Dance movement therapy is the process of honoring the body's wisdom and allowing it the room and space to communicate. The body is always sending a signal. It's always trying to say stuff. Sometimes in a busy day, excuse me, I know that I forget to listen to my body. but it's always communicating. Take a simple thing like hungry. You get hungry, your body tells you. You want to give it room and space to say more, to share more. The running joke when I was in grad school, thinking a headache could be just a headache, right? Because sometimes that headache might be related to something else. Dance movement therapy is the belief that dance and movement can be healing. I think that is the fundamental piece, right? That when we invite movement, it's healing. I think cultures through time have figured this out, but we kind of forgot it as time went on, at least in the culture that I live in. Not every culture has. They've continued that wisdom and remembered that movement can be healing. Dance movement therapy is the understanding of a bidirectional link between the mind and the body, right? So this isn't unidirectional. It's both ways. I think that's a key piece too. That dance movement therapy is you can work with the psychological and work with your mind, and that impacts your body. Just like I mentioned earlier, the body can impact the mind. It goes both ways, and that I think is also pretty key. Dance movement therapy is the understanding that our bodies can express what our minds may feel or think consciously or unconsciously. So a lot happens unconsciously. Most people could probably guess that, right? A lot of the brain works to make things actually unconscious, so it doesn't have to use as much energy. It's kind of a natural process. Like when we make choices, sometimes our choices are driven by our past influence, right? And that happens sometimes unconsciously. So the body can express that, right? It can show, like I used the example of sadness. But let's say I grew up in a cantankerous household, and I learned to live in an environment where there's constant push and pull. I may unconsciously bring that forward into my present and set up my environment because I know what that push and pull feels like. So I did it unconsciously, but I feel safe in that because that's what I grew up in. Dance movement therapy is the belief that dance and their movement allows us to fulfill a basic human need. So this actually aligns with one of the people who have credited with kind of founding dance movement therapy, Marion Chaves. But I also believe this too because we have a basic need to move, right? But when I say move, I'm not necessarily, again, talking about big, grandiose movements. Blinking our eyes, breathing, those are all movements. If you think about even cells, right? Cells are not static. They're moving. Everything about us is moving. The blood is pulsing through our veins. That in and of itself is moving. And dance movement therapy is the creative method of exploring ourselves, our need, our mental health, and our trauma. If we have trauma, but it allows us to explore ourselves, our needs, our mental health in a creative way, right? So there is sometimes a performance aspect. Some people like that aspect. It doesn't have to be. Let me reiterate, it does not have to have a performance aspect. But some people do. It's part of their healing process. So for example, being able to perform their story on stage is so powerful for them. Right? It's a creative process. It doesn't mean that they have to sit there and like delve into the deepest, darkest places. Their body naturally unfolds in these beautiful moments. That also can happen in a session in dance movement therapy. It doesn't have to be performance, but even in a session, that can happen. Just to reiterate. All right, so this slide, I'm really excited to share. Again, this is in brief because there's so much to be said on this topic. It's vast and it's very important. So I don't want to gloss over it. So dance is all over the world, right? Every culture, right? Well, not every, but I would venture to say every culture, I mean, I have no proof of that, has some sort of dance in their life, right? Whether it's traditional, whether they've brought it over and it's evolved into different, from exposure to different cultures. But there is some sort of dance and movement in culture. So I found this wonderful article that I'm citing from a little bit today because I felt like it was a very beautiful way of advocating for some of these things. So dance is a conduit of both community and individual healing in the African tradition. It is a form that connects the contemporary with the traditional or tradition. So African tradition, yes, community and individual healing. I think there's other dance cultures and dance that would say the same thing. But I think that's interesting. It's community and individual. We do not exist in a vacuum. We are social creatures. we are raised socially, right? Think about mom or caregiver and baby, right? There's a relationship there. We are born to engage in relationship. So we can't forget that community as well as the individual. It connects the contemporary with the traditional. Right? So if we think about some of the past traditions of dance, that dance has carried forward. Maybe it's evolved over time, but it has carried forward and it transmits culture, teachings, all these pieces that necessarily words don't necessarily capture. So contemporary healing practices need to integrate multiple therapeutic paradigms for diverse client populations. So from this perspective, if I was looking as a counselor, as a dance movement therapist, I think even if you're potentially the client or someone who's looking into what dance movement therapy is, right, there's a need that a practitioner meet somebody where they're at. That doesn't mean that everyone favors the written word or everyone favors art. Right? Incorporating these different pieces into the work allows us to be expressive, allows us to have more engagement in the process, if that's what resonates with us. So dance plays a role in the spiritual and social development of many communities throughout the world. Truth, right? You could probably pick a spirituality. I mean, I'll pick yoga for the moment. And while there are many different lineages and traditions of yoga, one of them, Hatha, has the asana practice, right? And social development. Think about what dance and movement has done. It has brought people together. Even when you just think about just walking together with somebody, or bike riding with somebody, anything along those lines, right? There's something in that, like this rhythmic, repetitive piece of just moving with somebody, even just sitting next to somebody. I know that sounds like, what? At the same time, imagine how it feels just to sit with somebody. I mean, you can recall an experience. Someone just sat with you, and was there with you presently, just breathing with you, right? Movement, breathing. And this last one is my point, but there's wisdom in dance and movement. It's time to remember the wisdom passed down to us through different cultures. The past needs to come forward. Right? I think, as I mentioned earlier, some cultures got off track and forgot that there's wisdom in bringing that past forward. Dance has served so much in our history. Why did we cut it out of our lives? That's my advocacy around dance and culture. But like I said, there's much more to be said about that. So to dance is human. So this is a quote from a book, and I think it's actually really nicely said. To dance is human, and humanity universally expresses itself in dance through its ability to interweave with other aspects of human life, such as communication and learning, belief systems, social relations, political dynamics, loving and fighting, urbanization, and change. Right? So all aspects of human life, communication, think about how much communication happens non-verbally. Right? Dance movement therapist is fabulous at watching for those nonverbal cues. Like, even the human brain is actually really fabulous at it. It's constantly picking up on those signals, even if we're not consciously aware of it. We learn through movement, and our belief systems transmitted through dance and movement and social relations, all these different things we kind of already alluded to. I think that is key. The dance is human, humanity universally expresses itself. So keep that in mind. And again, I will reiterate this. I know it's probably redundant, and I'm sorry. Just means dance does not have to be a dance form. It can be, like I said, movements, gestures, movement tags, all these different things that can be dance, that can be movement, and that's a window in. So final thoughts. So here is where I want to just speak from the heart. I had nothing specifically planned for this slide, except for the fact that I wanted to come back to the idea that dance is everywhere. Dance and movement is a piece of our lives. And if you think about what dance movement therapy is, it's using, again, from what we talked about, it's using the body, involving it in the process of working on your mental health. Right? That's basically a very simplistic version, but that's what it is in a nutshell. And what I find beautiful is that each dance form, if we look at dance forms, for example, like some of the ones that are here, have their own way of expressing, bringing in culture, all these different pieces, as do you. So there was some wisdom that I was told way back when I was taking continuing education. Well, we have cultures, there's also microcultures of one. So I challenge you to think about what your dance is, what your movement is, and what it is in your life. So references based on my citations earlier. And if you've got questions, if you'd like to reach out and ask what dance movement therapy is, if you'd like to connect, please feel free to reach out to me. I have my phone number and my email address there, as well as you can also follow me on social media. But thank you so much for attending this presentation. I'm so glad that you did. I hope that you found it helpful. Excuse me. And you learned a little bit about what dance movement therapy is. If it just made you even more curious, there is definitely other resources. Like I mentioned, you can go to the American Dance Therapy Association's website. You can actually kind of Google dance movement therapy, and there's actually a few good articles that come up right at the top. Just be careful what you choose. Make sure it's a reputable source. And there's actually a lot of dance movement therapists out there in the world. So, and I bet you, anyone of them would be happy to chat with you about what dance movement therapy is and how it can be supportive to you, to the community, and just share their passion. So with that, thank you so much once again. I look forward to chatting with you soon.